Live from Washington, this is Equal Time for Tuesday, August 24th. Here are Ollie North and Paul Bagala.
Good evening. A new poll released today shows that an overwhelming majority of Americans still have confidence in their public schools. 70% favor improving our schools, while 28% prefer providing vouchers. But the voucher idea is growing in some states. Florida, where we saw Governor Jeb Bush earlier tonight, started one just last week. And here's how the plan works. Qualified families would receive nearly $3,400 to put toward a private or parochial school. This money is taken from public school coffers, but any extra cost would be picked up by the private institution. Some critics argue that public schools might suffer because of this, and others argue that using public funds for religious schools violates the separation of church and state, which is why, just hours ago, a federal judge in Cleveland, Ohio, blocked that city's 4-year-old voucher system pending a lawsuit, preventing thousands of students from going to their first day of school tomorrow. Joining us now to discuss this hot issue front and center, Gerald Tirozzi, the executive director of the National Association of Secondary School Principals, and Jeanne Allen, the president of the Center for Education Reform. Welcome to Equal Time.
Thank you.
Jeanne, let me start with you.
Sure.
Why should public taxpayer dollars support elite private academies?
It's two issues, Paul. First one's a salvation issue. We have children in failing schools in this country that none of us can work fast enough to get salvation for. In other words, we got to get them an education.
Not spiritual salvation now. You're just talking about schools that work.
No, we're talking about getting them an education that works. There are failing schools. The two you pointed out in Florida were failing schools 2 years in a row. So on one hand, we're helping the poorest kids who are doing the worst in the worst schools get out and get a better education. No one can argue against that. The second issue is one purely of common sense. There's no one-size-fits-all school system anymore. We have more choice than ever before. We have charter schools, public schools, magnet schools, and increasingly private school options, both publicly and privately funded. Those children deserve a chance, like people who are more affluent, to have their parents say, you know, my child learns this way or my child learns that way. We got to have a choice over more than just the school that my child's assigned to, which in many times is a poor school.
But we have no choice whether or not to pay taxes. We pay taxes or we go to prison. Those are public funds.
Absolutely.
And I have a problem, as a religious person, with my taxpayer money going to support someone else's religious views. What do you do when someone from the Church of the Aryan Nation comes in? Or frankly, Louis Farrakhan is quite offensive to some people, comes in. Or the Wiccans who teach witchcraft. Or what if Ollie wants to set up a Republican school, God forbid?
There's a nice thought.
There's nothing that prevents that from happening today,
right,
nor 20 years ago, without vouchers.
Funds.
Oh, no, without vouchers. Are you kidding me? There's a lot of objectionable stuff going on. But the point is the private schools to where these kids go are accountable by virtue of the fact that they have a track record. Parents are choosing to vote with their feet and spend the tax dollars that you and I decide we need to give them to follow that child to a school of choice. That makes perfect sense.
Ollie's going to try to make sense out of this.
I appreciate Gerald being here to deal with this today. You share my sense of outrage at what Judge Solomon Oliver did today in Cleveland. The day before school is supposed to open in Cleveland, Ohio, he shuts down a 4-year successful voucher program that's been widely endorsed by the parents in Cleveland. Don't you share my outrage that he would do this?
The major concern I have with the judge's decision is coming the day before school starts.
So I have to point out this was a Clinton-appointed judge. I'm sure that's just a coincidence.
But I have no problem with his decision because I'm not going to get into the legal aspect of this regarding the Supreme Court and Fifth Amendment and the rights of students. I simply want to make the strongest possible case, and Jeanne knows, and I strongly disagree on the voucher question. I think the salvation of public education does not resonate to choice to private or parochial schools. First and foremost, the private and parochial schools operate on a very different playing field. They accept only the children they want to accept. They can return any child to a public school who does not meet their standards, and I'm all for standards. We don't operate that way in the public sector. Are they going to open the doors to youngsters with special needs, youngsters who are behind in reading, youngsters who have serious discipline problems? And I think the answer is an emphatic no. They play on a different playing field.
If the parents of those, let me take the case where Jeanne was just talking about. In Florida, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in Cleveland, Ohio, where these programs have been successful and parents were given the chance to choose, What's your beef with parents choosing that they might send their children to a school that's less violent, better education?
They have that choice. They've always had that choice. They have always had that choice. My first 3 years of teaching were in a Catholic high school. Everyone who came there chose to be there. And you know what?
Parents could afford it,
if they didn't meet our standard, that's right. They could afford it. And for those who say it's the salvation,
the church lets a lot of kids in who can't afford it.
It's the salvation for the individual kids, though.
Washington, D.C. would be a very good example. Last year's voucher proposal, which went down, would have accommodated approximately 2,500 students from Washington, D.C.
And would have required
there are more than 70,000 students in Washington.
You know, there's an issue here.
What would have happened to the remainder of the youngsters who were left
There's
behind?
an issue here about private schools. Hold on.
Lowest common denominator education.
There's a couple of myths circulating here. One, that private schools somehow are set up in the inner cities of America and elsewhere and just taking the cream of the crop.
That's what they do, Jeanne.
Friends,
they do.
I got news for you. You look at the Catholic schools in Milwaukee, in Cleveland, in New York City, and in Florida right now, and those people are taking kids that are not Catholic, that are special needs, that were sent out of the public school because
I'm a Catholic, and those Catholic schools teach those kids, which I believe, that the Mass is the body and blood of Jesus Christ. That's not for public schools to be teaching, is it? Why should taxpayer money support my private religion?
This is not a matter of what you want or what I want. It's a matter of how we educate children in this country. And until we get our hands around the fact that there is not one system that's run by everyone in Washington or the state capitals that is the way to go, we will not have improved schools in this country. We've got to help. It's not the only thing, but we've got to open up the system to let other people in.
Let me just make an observation here. Paul is saying the government's going to dictate that. If the parent decided that they were going to be given a voucher, tax voucher, to send their kids to whatever one of those schools you just ran off the long litany, let the parents choose. What's wrong with that?
The taxpayers should pay for the Aryan nation.
Let him answer the question. Welcome back.
First of all, we're talking about public dollars. And every public dollar that is used to support a child going to a private or parochial school comes right off the top of the amount of money you're giving to the public schools. So for those who say that because of competition the public schools will improve, it's a major problem.
It's already happening in Milwaukee. The schools
not true. Not true. Every evaluation on Milwaukee, it's skewed. It goes both ways. And there are experts on both sides. One makes the statement it has improved. The other makes the statement it has not improved. There's no data to date. Also, I want to go back to my initial premise. It's a comparison of apples and oranges. The private and parochial schools siphon off the best kids. They don't take the problem youngsters, and if they are problems, they return them to the public schools. That's not fair. You can't operate a public school. You can't operate schools.
Let me ask you a question about it. There's a Gallup poll out today, which comes around every year and asks people collection of questions about education, public and private. They asked people which they would prefer, focusing on, as the president has called for, on reducing class size in the public schools, or turning, as the Republicans have proposed in the Congress, to a voucher system. By 70 to 28, they prefer reducing class size in the public schools as the means to salvation. In politics, where I have some experience, 70 to 28 is a rout. You've lost this debate, haven't you?
Well, you know, guess what? There was 3 voucher questions in that same poll where they got unprecedented numbers. And that same
still
exact
less than a
poll,
majority.
No, it was more than majority. It was 55-48%. Today's same poll, exact same poll, had the numbers skewed in favor of vouchers they have every year. And our poll did too. When you give someone a combination, it's a false choice. Would you rather spend more money on the public schools or do vouchers? Something Gerald said, which is very valid, but just no, the money doesn't come off the top. It's not an either or. We need options for children. It does not. It comes out of publicly funded dollars that are for education.
Let me put it in different terms, perhaps. The same point Jeanne was just making. Since the 1970s, the federal government has taken our tax dollars and invested ever more heavily in America's public education. True fact.
It's been about 6% for the last 20 years.
And can you sit here at this table tonight, Doc, and tell us that America's public schools are better for those tax dollars?
There are a number of studies which would, in fact, tell you that America's public schools have improved.
The test scores, the violence,
SAT scores, the NAEP scores are up. Yep. Violence is down, drug use is down.
And we have kids who are homeschooled and going to public or private schools and parochial schools who win across the board.
Let's understand the comparison of today with 30 years ago. 30 years ago, we had a dropout rate in this country probably of 40%. Today, it's at about 20%. Years ago in this country, high school was for elite students. Today, the goal in America is that all students
But
will
they're
receive a
learning
high
less.
school
Look at the
education.
SAT.
That is
We've
not
had
true.
to dumb down
That
the
is-
SAT year after
you did
year
not
after
dumb
year.
down the
Absolutely.
SAT.
They've taken off the hardest sections.
No.
They've reduced. They've given more
There are
time to take it.
psychometricians who would argue that point very strongly.
The number
No.
of top achieving kids in this country has precipitously dropped over the last 20 years. That is
And
a fact.
I want a
And guess
prediction.
what?
We got to take a break, otherwise we're going to be late for class. I want a prediction from both of you. Will this judge relent in Cleveland, Gerald Tirozzi?
No.
This is going to
Jeanne?
the Supreme Court.
It's going to the Supreme Court.
Yep.
And the kids will have to wait.
Absolutely. They
I
suffer.
I appreciate you both taking time
Thank
to
you.
join us tonight, because parents all across America are concerned about how their kids are educated.
Absolutely.
believe
Thank you
that.
very much. Later on Equal Time.